we doing today? Are y'all ready for another awesome panel? All right, let's do this. My name is Charlene Jimenez. I am the daughter of Filipino and Indian immigrants, and I am the Director of Partnerships and Advocacy at Define American. We're proud to co-present this panel today with our friends at USC Hollywood Health and Society. Shout out to Kate. For those of y'all who don't know Define American, we are a nonprofit culture change organization, and we believe in using the power of storytelling to humanize conversations about immigrants in Hollywood, journalism, digital media, and beyond. We really believe that you can't change the politics of immigration until we change the culture through which immigrants are seen. So how the heck do we change the culture? One way that we do that at Define American is working directly with showrunners, writers, development executives on immigrant storylines and navigating immigration storylines specifically. And the folks you're about to meet change the culture through the wonderful immigrant characters that they're putting on screen today. So without further ado, please allow me to introduce our panelists. We have Miranda Kwok, writer and executive producer of Fox's The Cleaning Lady, which just got picked up for season 2. Mike Gauyo, co-creator and executive producer of Send Help on AMC's all-black streaming service and founder of the Black Boy Rights Mentorship Program. Linda Yvette Chávez, co-creator, co-EP, showrunner of Gentefied. And Melvin Mar, executive producer of Fresh Off the Boat, Doogie Kamea Aloha MD, and almost every other AAPI project you're about to see on American TV. Welcome, everyone. I feel like we were able to assemble the Avengers of immigrant storytelling here today. Like, what is this? Yes, can we give them another round of applause? I also want to shout out Hamza Haq, who was going to be on this panel, but unfortunately could not make it, so he's here in spirit with us. I'm going to kick us off with a little bit of level setting here. So we live in a country of 45 million immigrants. And of those 45, yes, 45 million immigrants, yes! Of those 45, 11 million of those immigrants are undocumented. So even though there's been some improvement in the number of immigrants on television, there's still a lot of work that we have to do to tell more of those stories and to do so authentically. Define American's 2020 research with USC Annenberg Norman Lear Center shows that immigrants are still over-criminalized, AAPI immigrants were still underrepresented, Middle Eastern North African immigrants are overrepresented and over-villainized, and several immigrant communities weren't even represented at all. Undocumented Black immigrants, immigrants with disabilities, transgender immigrants, just zero representation. Now, that was 2 years ago. We're publishing new research this fall, and we'll see how things shape up. But until then, how do we feel TV is doing right now in terms of immigrant representation? Like, how's it going out there? Anyone can chime in.
You, Melvin.
I mean, I think it's getting better. And I think for me personally, until my career is over, it's going to be like it's going to be a constant, goal, But in the 20 years that I've sort of been around this, starting from the very beginning, it's light years different. Part of the thing that I love doing, and one of the big focuses of mine and Jake's company is just like the AAPI focus on it. And I think I have this thing in my head from when I was an intern where I remember pitching an idea about Asian American guys, like Asian American swingers. It wasn't a good idea, but I remember bringing it up to the intern coordinator, and very directly he was like, well, who's gonna be in it? It wasn't even a thought of he wasn't even criticizing the idea. It was just not a possibility. That was the tone of it, right? And that's something that's never left me. And I think, you have to do something about it. Drives me.
You say it drives you crazy?
No, it drives me.
Oh, it drives you. Oh,
drives you.
yeah.
In a positive way.
Oh, got
Drives
it.
forward, like we gotta keep going,
These
right?
things also drive me crazy sometimes.
That too.
Yeah, I mean, I think everything you just described is like what we have to tackle, and I think on top of that is, although it's very important to tell immigration stories that start at the border, that it's important to also see immigration stories and immigrants living in this country, living as Americans, living in their joy, living in this world, because we still are seen as foreign even when we've been here for 30, 40 years. Our stories are still seen as foreign even when we've been here 30, 40 years. Even when our people sometimes are indigenous to the lands, we're seen as foreign. So I think being able to break out of the narrative of like every immigrant story has to start on the border and has to be rooted in struggle. Not that there's anything wrong with telling those stories, I think those are necessary too, but I think when we silo all of our representation to that one place, it starts to really limit who we are and the way the world sees us. And I think being able to break out of that story, being able to tell more varied stories in addition to that one, I think is really important. And I think for me would be the next phase of where we need to go.
Absolutely. Just to piggyback off of Linda, when you mentioned like just varied stories, I think we've just kind of like cracked the surface when it comes to telling immigrant stories, because beyond telling immigrant stories of different cultures and ethnicities and things like that, there are the subcultures that exist within that, whether you're a gay immigrant or a disabled immigrant or a gay disabled immigrant or, you know, or different like unique experiences that you're having within being an immigrant, where you're not wearing your ethnicity or your status on your sleeve, but you're just existing. And being able to tell those stories is just as important.
Yeah, I feel really excited right now. I feel very fortunate and very grateful to have the opportunity to actually finally put marginalized voices on the screen for broadcasts on a broadcast network for a wide audience. And I think what has been, you know, really heartwarming for me is, you know, when I set out to create the show, I wasn't thinking about, you know, who's the audience or what do people want to see. I just decided that I want to tell a story about an undocumented immigrant, you know, who's unable to work in this country in her own profession, and just really dig into her character and who she is and all the layers of what that means. And I think the fact that it's been so well received and so well embraced is fantastic for us as creators, because it shows that there is an audience and an appetite out there for these stories. And we've proven the networks, you know, that we have a voice, and that, you know, people are coming out and showing up. So I think it's actually a fantastic time.
Agreed. I think everything's moving forward, right? And, you know, how do we keep moving it forward? I want to touch on something you just mentioned a second ago, Linda, is the idea of joy. And I'm not just saying that because it's my middle name, but, you know, sympathy and suffering have been go-to themes in immigrant storytelling in the past, but we need to graduate from that, right? We need to tell stories that celebrate resilience and joy. Y'all have all done a really beautiful job in showcasing the joy of immigrants and children of immigrants. So I want to hear y'all's reflection on just some joyful moments for each of your characters. Like, what are some really joyful moments that you want to reflect on, or that you felt passionate about portraying on screen? This can go to any one of you.
Really enjoyed Chinese superstition. Like number 4, we talked about that on Fresh Off the Boat. We talked about when I was a kid, we used our dishwasher as a drying rack, which I remember we put that in a script, and then there were some ABC execs who were like, we don't get this. Like, is this a thing? And I was like, yes, it's a thing. And the funny thing is, when the episode aired, it wasn't just like Chinese people or Asian people. Like, everybody was like, yeah, my mom didn't use it. Like, we just used it to dry. So that was funny. I love like those things, those specific things that, like, you know, immigrant families are just, you know, families that, you know, first generation families, like, sort of deal with, and you know, it's specific and great, and, you know, it's things that sort of unify everybody. There's a universality to it. Yeah.
I think for me, we had Casimiro, who's Pop in the show, have a love story with Lupe, and being able to see him fall in love and kind of go through the journey of finding his joy and through her learning about thriving versus just surviving and what it means to be thriving and bringing your joy. So there's a scene at El Mercadito in Royal Heights where they're both like, it's like a little montage of them playing in masks and trying on hats and dancing and having a good time. I think it was, being able to see him be happy and joyful and smiling is something that I know for Marvin and I, my co-creator on the show, we want for our parents and our grandfathers and our aunts and our uncles who are constantly in that grind of work. And there was a second moment for Beatriz, who's Anna's mom in episode 8 of first season. You see her grinding in the factory the whole episode, and at the end you see her she finally kind of has a win, and she's doing face masks and like dancing with her daughter to 80s music. And it's just allowing them to have that humanity in a lot of ways. Those were some of my favorite moments.
To just exist, right? Like us just existing. We need to do that.
I love that. Joyous moments. Send Help is a dark comedy. So I wouldn't say that there were a lot of joyous moments per se, but what brings me joy about the show is being able to see a reflection of myself in these characters that I haven't seen before. They're, Haitian American characters. They're, not caricatures, they're not monolithic, they're not, the accents are correct, which is important. And, being able to show like the kind of layered, being able to show that they're layered human beings, basically. That brings me joy. I find that joyous. But also, one of our characters is pansexual. And, being a pansexual Haitian American person isn't something that you often see, let alone something that's explored on television. So being able to do that has been really important to us. But also showing a Haitian mother and like how she expresses grief on television is similar to how a lot of immigrant women in their 50s who are, first-generation Americans express grief, and seeing what that looks like is something I haven't seen before. So being able to do that and express that feels like fulfilling, feels joyous to me, Yeah.
I would say every time Tony and Fiona hit the screen together, that is pure joy. One of the things I've always wanted to do is create like a female Breaking Bad. But the real touchstone of the show, the real heart of the show is Tony and Fiona and the family. The family is joy, love is joy, even as they're going through their struggles, the way they back each other up, it's just incredible. And honestly, like every draft of the script that comes in, Fox says, how can we get in more Tony and Fiona? What can we do? Like, let's get more scenes with them. And that is amazing to show that family, to show that love.
That's beautiful. We have to lean into that, right? So next I want to talk about the good immigrant narrative, and I'm going to throw this to Linda and Mike. But a common narrative is this myth that only good immigrants who are hardworking are worthy of living in the U.S. and are worthy of having rights. Why is this trope problematic, and why do you feel it's important for your immigrant characters to be flawed and complicated? Start with Linda.
I mean, it's problematic because you don't have to prove your worth to anyone, period.
Yes.
And I think that, especially if you come from an immigrant family, the feeling of constantly needing to prove that you're worthy of being here is like at the core of everything, and it's exhausting. And I think that there's a lot of amazing movements like Define American that have shown that narrative is not necessary and that you don't have to be perfect to be seen as worthy of citizenship. And I think that was something that we really tackled in season 2 of the show with Pop, wanting to show him as flawed. I mean, we see it in the first episode of the show that he, gets arrested for throwing a bottle, and who hasn't had a moment like that where they were drunk and did something, but yet that defines this man who is a pillar of the community, who's run his shop for 30 years, who took care of the kids in the community, who has a family that he loves, and yet that is what's going to define him as whether or not he's good or bad, and whether or not he has to beg to be worthy to be in this country. And that was a big conversation we had. And when we're developing season 2, America especially really helped to push that conversation around the good versus bad immigrant, and wanting to have that pivotal moment in that interview scene where he says, "Fuck y'all. Like, I am not gonna beg you all to let me be to be in a place where this is my home, whether you like it or not," is what he says. And I think that that's a necessary conversation, or a necessary thing to say and call to action. Yeah.
I wrote down a quote from him.
Yes.
He says this line, "I'm not a perfect immigrant, but I know I'm not a criminal." And he's looking directly into camera, and that encapsulates just everything that you just said, right? Mike, do you have any on that too?
I mean, first of all, nobody's perfect, right?
Correct.
So the idea of, having to create characters like that immediately narrows your ability to make your character universal. You know what I mean? So it's just it's a false idea. So the fact that we're able to create these characters and make them flawed and make them human and make them layered is what makes audiences relate, and what widens the demographic of people who are able to relate to it because they can see a bit of themselves in that, no matter your culture, right? So, and that's the great thing about television. It's the ability to be able to see yourself in someone else that you wouldn't think you'd be able to connect to, and building that connection, So it's always about trying to find the universality in these unique stories in order to help people relate to an experience.
Thank you for that.
I did,
Yeah,
actually, because,
please.
I did get that question in the beginning where people said, like, aren't you concerned of having a show with people of color be criminals? Like, you have criminals, represented across the board, so why can't Asian women be criminals too, right? But as Mike said, I mean, I'm being a little facetious, but as Mike said, it's about dimensionalizing them and creating, multi-layered characters, which is what you want for any character. But also, one thing that was really important in this particular show is to show that there are a lot of people who get into crime because of their circumstances. And so that is a situation that we did create in the show. It's like she's not choosing to get into crime. She's trying to do everything to get out, but everything keeps pulling her in because of the forces around her, because of the system, because of a lot of things where she's ultimately just fighting for her child. And so she's making tough decisions based on, not great options that are available to her, and really showing that struggle. And I think that, again, like that, so when you do that, when you're able to show what's actually going on with a character, that is when you can humanize them and really get an audience to have empathy and compassion for them.
Right, because, Tony, at the end of the day, is a mother who would do anything for her child. I mean, that's a universal thing that we can all, that everyone can relate to. Everyone either, has a child or is someone's child or has, children in their lives. And so, really appreciate the nuance of just that lens first and foremost with her, right? So just as a follow-up to that, and this one will go to Miranda and Melvin, but in Define Americans 2020 research with USC, 12% of immigrant characters on television were AAPI versus real life, in which 26% of immigrants in America are AAPI. That's the largest disparity between representation and real life of any other immigrant group. And people don't realize that AAPIs are actually the fastest growing racial group in America. Y'all know that? Yeah. So, yay. We're coming up. So you're both doing a lot of work for AAPI representation through both of your projects. What else needs to happen out there to move AAPI immigrant representation forward? I'll start with Melvin.
I mean, I think, like I said earlier, it's headed in the right direction. But the thing that I always say is just more writers and creators like Miranda, like everyone on here, just telling those stories. That's just when somebody like Miranda comes up with a show, writes it, and puts it out there, even more than like actors in front of the camera. It's even more important. Like that's the key to all of it, you know? And I remember, like, I make myself sound old because I am, but like I remember when I just knew all the AAPI writers in town. And now I get really happy when I just meet some that I don't know, like I didn't know Miranda, and we just met, and that's awesome. You know, Fox imported her from Toronto, so that's good for them. Like, you know, like that needs to happen on a huge level, and I think it's on its way to happening, and you know, it's really, really cool.
I think, yeah, just keep, you know, being passionate about telling stories that matter and that matter to you. And I, you know, this isn't the first show that I pitched to have a predominantly Asian cast. And I didn't have that much success. You know, I sold a show that, you know, got to script, but it was a little before its time. It was before Crazy Rich Asians. And you know, we have to be honest, like that did open a lot of doors that showed people that are concerned about finances that there is that audience and that people will make money. And that really allowed executives to see and then look for that representation and look for those voices. So, I mean, that's why I say I feel lucky. You know, I didn't, you know, I hit at a time, I pitched the show at a time where people were looking for that content. And so that all lends to the success of it. But again, it's about telling the story that moves you, that you are passionate about, and not giving up, you know, because it's that passion that, you know, when you tell a story that speaks from your heart, that's what's going to sell.
I want to commend you for just the Southeast Asian representation on your show. You know, you've really turned this cleaning lady stereotype on its head with these powerful, you know, just badass Filipina and Cambodian women. You know, have you gotten any feedback from Southeast Asian communities about the show? I mean, I'll tell you, when I heard Tagalog being spoken on screen, I almost passed out. Like,
yeah, honestly, it's been amazing, and that is honestly why representation matters. Like people say that phrase all the time, representation matters, and I never felt it more than now. And there have been so many people who have reached out randomly on, you know, Instagram or Twitter to say thank you, I finally feel seen. I can't believe they're speaking Tagalog, or you know, I can't believe you put De La Rosa, you know, on a show, and my parents would be in tears. And all of that just really touches me and moves me so much. And then it's, you know, it's Asian representation. There's immigration, you know, immigrant representation. People who just, you know, say like this was my parents' story or my story, but I felt so alone. And so I feel like this is why the show is being received, is that people are connecting with the messages, are connecting with the stories and the characters, and they finally feel like they're not alone. They finally feel like they have a voice.
thank you.
Can I actually add a little something to that
Heck
too?
yeah, you can.
Thank you, Charlene. So I would say most of you here are writers, right? No? So, yes, okay, great. So a lot of times I find that writers will try to write what they think the network will want, or they will write something that's like, oh, okay, well, this show's successful. Let me write something like that because whatever they greenlit was successful, so let me try that, right? The thing is, sometimes the network doesn't know what they want until they've read it. So I would say in your work, be as specific as possible, you know, in your experience, if that's what you're wanting to write about, like share that, because oftentimes, and in our situations, we've been very specific about what it is that we want to write and want to see. And that resonated with those networks. So I would say don't think so much about mandates or what you see is working out there. Think about yourself and think about what you can uniquely bring to the project or to a story or to a network and just let the cards fall where they may, because it will make you a success.
100%. I'm gonna jump on that too, because I've experienced it firsthand where, I'll tell the story because Scott Silveri, I've told it many times, where he, I met with him, I didn't know him, and I made fun of him. I said, I learned your name from the script font at the end of Friends, because he was on Friends forever. And we sat and had lunch, and he kept telling me, like, how about this roommate story? How about that? I go, they're all rip-offs of Friends, Scott. Like, it's not that exciting, but okay. And then I just started talking to him about where he was from. He's from Yonkers. He talked about how he became a comedy writer because his brother was a bully to him, and, that thing. And the very last detail, he threw it away. He was just like, oh yeah, he has cerebral palsy. And I'm like, that's the show. Like, you've never seen a kid in a wheelchair with cerebral palsy be a dick on TV. That's awesome. Like, we should do that. And then, it's like his story. He knew it. Like, with his eyes closed, he could just spit it out, and he did. And it was set up at Fox. Michael Thorne was not there. And they didn't want to make it. So, Scott was like, but I poured my heart out, and I was like, we're going to make it. Just hang on a sec. And, what you're saying is really apt, because it's what you know, and it's likely going to be one of the best things you've ever written, because you know it so well. And the rest of it, when it comes to getting it made, is a timing thing. And immediately after Fox passed on it, we took it, and I gave it to ABC, and within 3 drafts was ordered the pilot. It happened. But what he's saying is 100% correct. As a writer, you feel it that way, do that, stick with it. My good friend Phil, who's here but not in this room, will say, make the show you want to make, because they'll cancel you anyway.
That's awesome. So next I want to talk about the idea of assimilation. And I'm going to throw this to Mike and Melvin, but there's this false ideal of assimilation, which implies that immigrants have to give up their customs and culture to become American. How have you balanced your characters' relationships to their cultural identities, along with other aspects about them, their hopes and fears and dreams are existing?
I don't think, the needle that we thread all the time on our shows is, it's not about assimilation, but it's about adding to what it means to be American, And I remember early on pitching Fresh Off the Boat. It was years ago, where it was still a little taboo. The title wasn't, made people uncomfortable, mostly PC white people. But, and we started talking about what Fresh Off the Boat meant, right? Just as an American. And I remember the head of 20th at the time was this guy named Johnny Davis, who was the whitest man you've ever met. Just the waspiest guy ever, right? And we would walk into pitches with him, and we're like, everybody's off a boat, unless you're, Native American or First Nation. I learned that in Canada. So we started calling Johnny Mayflower Davis in our pitches. And it worked, so we sold it. It was he's off a boat, we're off a boat, Mayflower Davis is, Great. So, that's kind of the, philosophy in which started with the pitch, and it goes throughout the show. Everybody adds something to the fabric of what it means to be American, and everybody is some form of an immigrant,
I'll just echo what he said, because, I don't get assimilation. I feel like it's a false idea of what it means to be American, because America is a melting pot of different cultures and always has been. So the idea of assimilating to being American is just strange, and doesn't feel accurate. So when it comes to my work, I don't think about it. I just think about, creating the most authentic characters and allowing them to live. Yeah.
Allowing them to exist, right? There's that again. I want to talk more about your characters, Mike. And I want to share this statistic with everyone that today in the US, 1 in every 10 Black Americans is an immigrant, according to Pew. That's a stat that not a lot of people know. Yet Black Americans' stories are often just erased from pop culture and from the broader immigrant conversation altogether. And I mean all kinds of Black immigrants. I'm talking about Afro-Latina immigrants, African immigrants, folks from the Caribbean, Haitian immigrants. So I want to praise characters like Jessica on Gentefied and Fritz in Mike's upcoming series, Send Help. Can you tell us a little bit about your new project and just the need for stories that reflect the experiences of Black immigrants?
Yeah, absolutely. First, I'll say this. I was born in Haiti, moved to the States when I was 4. We moved to Boston, Massachusetts. And what I discovered upon moving is that I wasn't shocked by, like, my Caucasian counterparts. I almost expected them to be different. What I was shocked by is other Black people that didn't speak Creole. Like, I'm 4 years old, I see you look like I do, and I'm speaking to you, but you do not speak my language. It was my first instance of like, oh, okay. Not having the language then, of course, I didn't know what monolithic meant then, but being able to identify that we live varied experiences and come from different places started very young. So when you think about, or when I think about creating Send Help, I want to be able to show that yes, African American culture exists in the States, it's prevalent, Black culture exists, yes, but there are subcultures within being Black that exist, whether you're an immigrant, whether you're Haitian American, Jamaican American, from any one of the African countries that exist, and we all like have a different subcultures that exist, you know what I mean? So being able to explore that is important. So Send Help is about a Haitian American actor living in LA, trying to pursue his career while also navigating his different relationships between his friends, his lovers, and his family that happens to be 3,000 miles away back in Boston while he's living in LA. And he's doing all this all while kind of processing the PTSD of, a tragedy that's taken place. It's like a Barry meets like Fleabag. So it's important to be able to show this Haitian American man just existing and living and taking care of his family and what that looks like for a lot of immigrant, children, like second generation, first generation immigrant children who are having to take care of their families, what that looks like. But also just seeing him just exist in the space of just being an American person, and what that looks like. So it's been really important for us to be able to show that. Aside from that, what's really been important to us as well is mental health, specifically Black male mental health, and what that looks like, and being able to explore that and being able to see, okay, how does my inability to express myself leak into my different relationships or affect my different relationships? You know what I mean? So, I think it's important. Please check it out. The show comes out in August on AMC's new streaming platform called All Black. And yeah, check out for it. Yeah.
For that. This next one's for Miranda and Linda. In your shows, The Cleaning Lady and Gentefied, respectively, you've both really led the charge in recent years in depicting undocumented characters on screen, and in doing so with nuance, and also mixed status families with nuance. Can you each tell us about your very deliberate decisions to include undocumented characters on screen? I want to start with Miranda.
Yeah, I mean, it was such an unrepresented group, especially on television. Usually people who are undocumented are told to just stay silent and stay in the shadows and not tell their stories. And either a lot of them are afraid to tell their stories because it's dangerous. You know, somebody can be here for 20, 30 years and still get deported. And they've built a life here. And so, so representing that perspective was very important. And then, as you said, creating a family with a mixed status was also really important because that's what a lot of people don't even realize, that, you know, somebody may be undocumented, but then their children are not. And then so what happens, you know, if somebody gets deported and the whole family is split apart, and what that does to a family, because obviously, you know, are you going to bring your child, you know, to a country that they've never been to when there's so many opportunities here and a life here? So we really wanted to give voice to that as well, and even tell the story of Chris, who finds out, you know, that he actually is undocumented, even though he thought he was born here. You know, because again, it's something that a lot of parents are afraid to talk about. You know, you don't tell people. You don't tell people who, you know, what your status is. Especially, you know, children's friends change, children talk, and so it's a very scary situation. So we wanted to represent that as well.
Yeah, you know, it's funny because your question earlier about what are the immigrant stories that we need to see now it's such a double-edged sword, because on one hand it's like there's still so much fear and so many folks hiding and not talking about their stories. At the same time, we need the joyous, like, here and safe stories. And I think, you know, with Pop, we were developing this series around the time that Trump came into presidency. And, you know, I remember the day after, it was a very somber day, and we had already a pre-scheduled meeting to, you know, work on our pitch with our producers. And we just all went around, and one of our producers, like, they were recording us because we were trying to fix a certain part of the pitch, and they were like, just tell us what you're feeling and what you want to say with this. And of course, for Marvin and I, it was very emotional because there had been a lot of the things that he was saying about Mexican communities, immigrant communities from Latin America was dangerous and painful to hear. Things that being said nationally, things that we've heard our whole lives that are always painful to hear. And so we kind of poured our hearts out in that moment. And I think as we were developing the pitch after that, the layer of having Pop be undocumented actually came after the fact, because there was so much happening during that time that we felt to not talk about it felt wrong in some ways, even though at the same time we wanted to move away from that. We were like, enough. Like, the number of stories I get, pitches, scripts about the border and undocumented immigrants, it's obscene sometimes, where I'm kind of like, hey guys, we have other stories too, and why am I getting all those stories? Where are they all being sent to all the Latinos, Latinas? And I think, like, we wanted to get away from that, but at the same time, it's like the reality is we do live with those people in our families, you know, in our own writer's room. Like, we're talking about going through the very experience that we're putting on camera, and yet at the same time, this country is still making us feel like we can't tell those stories because they're cliche or we're over it. Like, this weird in-between place that, like, we have to live in. And so with Pop, it was important to us to, if we were going to tell that story, how are we going to do it differently? And this journey of seeing a family not separated at a border, but separated over time. Here in the States, you see them have Thanksgiving, you see them have Christmas together, you see them living their lives, and how it really is to have a family member going through that process, how painful it is, how difficult it is. And we wanted to show that. We want to show that with a character that we wanted to make everyone fall in love with first, which is why we don't talk about him being documented all of first season. You don't find out till the very end. And that was purposeful, because we wanted you to fall in love with him. We wanted you to love him. We wanted you to be like, that's my grandpa. And then at the end be like, whoa, my grandpa's undocumented. Like, you could be a white person watching, or a person who is documented, or a citizen, and realize, oh, okay. Like, the people who are out there that look just like numbers to you are not numbers, they're Pop. And that's Pop's family. Like, is this what you're gonna do to them? Are you gonna, like, tear them apart in that way? And so that journey for Pop in the second season, we really tried to, like, stick the landing on in terms of, like, what that story looks like.
Yeah, I was also developing the show during the time where there were the unprecedented ICE raids across the country, and there was a particular day when 680 people were swept up by ice, and it was the first day of school. And it was so heartless, and seeing those children was heartbreaking. And that's when I pitched, like, let's do an ice raid, let's do it in the pilot. And Warner Brothers was like, okay, well, maybe, like, why don't we get to know our characters first? It was exactly that. It was like, let's have an audience fall in love with them, and then show them what happened. And so yeah, we put a pin in it. We thought, like, let's see. And for a while, it was like maybe at the season finale. And what was really interesting is that when we did the test for the pilot, and we had these dialogues with people who screened the pilot episode, and I got to watch on Zoom because I was not showing my face, and it was amazing because people were so drawn in to the immigration storylines and the struggles that they face, and they were so excited and interested to hear this perspective actually shown on screen. And so after that test screening, Fox actually said, yeah, let's just go for it. Let's just dive in. Let's bring those stories up. So a lot of those storylines, we dug in further, and it has paid off.
Yeah, I really appreciate both of what you're saying about not having their status define who they are. That comes up in our consulting a lot. Just wanting to have that be a label on a character when there are so many other facets to them, right?
It can't be the center of the story. That's the thing. It can't. I feel like we're all at some point developing a pilot about immigration story around the Trump era.
Sorry, I have to say this because you're talking about the response and changing hearts and minds, and it's so much more difficult to change minds, but it's what we do is try to reach people's hearts. And not only has it been so rewarding that people have come forward to say thank you, I finally feel seen, but on the flip side of that, there have been people, and LED tells a story that she has neighbors who are avid Trump supporters and completely against undocumented immigrants. And after episode 5, they said they were bawling their eyes out. And their opinions have changed because of it. And that's like the dream, that you can actually reach people.
I want to punctuate that with just some of the research that we did with USC in parasocial relationships, and it's exactly what you're saying, that when viewers develop an imagined friendship with a character or parasocial relationship with a character, especially when those folks are members of a marginalized community, it can actually reduce prejudice, especially among those who don't have interaction with those folks in real life. So, it's so meaningful to create these characters with nuance, to create these connections because of this. So thank you for saying that. So I want to talk a little bit, let me get my notes here. Talk about comedy. Let's lighten it up, right?
Oh, thank God.
Okay. So in addition to just creating these connections, comedy is also a really powerful tool, right? Melvin, I watched you on a panel yesterday, and you said something really interesting about, when you're laughing, you're comfortable, and when you're comfortable, you're listening. And I really appreciated that. And so I'd love to throw this to anyone to just talk about using comedy as a tool to deliver tough topics.
I feel like there's like the Norman Lear era of comedy, right? That came at, yes, Norman, yes, we love Norman. Yes, love it, we love it. And that whole like golden golden era of comedy came at a time when where there were a lot of changes taking place, and a lot of minds were being changed, you know? And to your point, and I think to what you just said, is that when you're able to laugh, it lets your guard down, so that you're able to see and understand something beyond yourself, you know? And you're not being attacked first. So I think he was masterful in that with his shows, because it allowed you to see different sides of people and get you to relate to them. Even Archie Bunker, you know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? Being able to relate to him. So I love comedy for being able to do that, because it does really allow people to let their guard down and consume information that they otherwise wouldn't have.
I feel like comedy is medicine, but comedy is also power. And comedy can disarm, comedy can put the power back in the hands of people who don't historically have the power. And I think both in front of and behind the camera, so for Gentefied, it was wonderful for Marvin and I to be holding the keys to what we get to make fun of, that people historically might have made fun of us for, like our food, our immigrant parents, our inability to say certain, like code switching in moments where like, I don't remember how to say that in English, like all of that, like we got to take that and put it into a show. And even being working class, like for us, it's multi-layered. It's not only immigrant family, but it's also being a working class family, having working class backgrounds, the things that the world would look at us and shame us for, we got to take and make it our own and empower ourselves and empower our characters to be the ones who tell you, like, this is who we are and this is how we function. And for us, it came from our own families. Like growing up, and I don't know if this is just a Mexican thing or all immigrant families, but like making fun of everything, even the most dire situations, is like the way to do things, because the trauma's too real, and you're just like, make a joke, make a joke, make a joke, because like you're just trying to get through it, and you learn it from your parents. It's survival techniques, it's survival tactics, like it's how you get through some of the more grim, difficult things in your life, and we wanted to show that in the show. Like our characters, this is still a comedy. So the second season was a little bit sadder, but because there's a whole pandemic that influenced our artistry. But I think that, like, you know, part of making the show for us was to show that, like, yes, we have dark times, but like all of the media about us doesn't have to be about us being sad, morose, and sepia tones, like crying and like depressed, because that's not, like, you know, everything you see, you know, pre the last probably 5 years has been that dramatic, sad version of us. And like, that's not the people that I know. That's not the family that I grew up with. Like the funniest people I know is my mom, my grandma, my tias crack me. They say the most inappropriate shit. And that's where I get my humor from. And I think it's so important for us to allow the full range of our identity in that way. And that also humanizes us, because if we're just these sad things that you have to save from tragedy, like why would you see us as whole people? You're seeing us as like something that needs to be saved. No, we're the full gamut of everything. And so that's why I love comedy. It's just a very beautiful way to take back your power.
I agree. For me personally, it's, you know, other than making it sort of a mantra of like professionally, it's how I got through adolescence, you know, being able to laugh about it. It's medicine. It heals everything. So I think, you know, using it is how you get across to a wider audience and get people to listen.
Give it up for comedy. All right, so yeah, we want to see more comedy out there in immigrant stories. What other kinds of immigrant stories do we want to see? I mean, like, if sky's the limit, no budget, like what type of stories do you each want to see out there for immigrants? Put them in space, too.
There's nobody from Disney here, right? Because I'm really proud of something we're working on now. That if they were here, they would say that, like, I have the attitude, sky's the limit, there's no budget. But it's not true. I'm very responsible. You know, it's we're working on the adaptation of American-Born Chinese, the graphic novel. And to me, it's probably one of it's the one thing that I've loved for over a decade, just the book itself. And having done Fresh Off the Boat, Kelvin, you and I talked about it and saw it as a way to sort of tell the next level of the Chinese American family story, And Jean Yang, who wrote the graphic novel, just had such a great grasp. And I don't know if you guys know who he is, but he's a comic book writer and artist. He does a lot of work for Marvel and DC. And in this graphic novel, he talks about just like the stories we grew up with, like the Monkey King, just like, very, sacred Eastern myths, stuff that we would hear about all the time. And I remember sitting in my grandmother's living room and watching these like old TVB, like Chinese martial arts movies. And we're getting to blend it, with, a story about a kid in high school. And it's a wider canvas, and we get to do some really cool martial arts stuff. Dustin Cretton is directing it, so we borrowed the whole Shang-Chi stunt team. So, it's great. And to me, that's like the evolution of, if you get to do Fresh Off the Boat, what's the next thing you're gonna do, And I'm really glad that came along, because for a while I remember thinking, as Fresh Off the Boat was ending, like, so I've checked the box, right? Like, no one's ever gonna like blame me for not doing something. And then I realized after that it's not about that. It's like, if you get one, you gotta get as many as you can, Like Phil says, they'll cancel you anyway. But it reminds me of just like growing up with a house full of boys. It's like, you better eat, otherwise somebody else will eat. So that's getting to do it.
What other kinds of stories do we want to see out there? It doesn't have to be something that you necessarily want to make, but like, who do we want to see on screen? We haven't.
I want to see more like older immigrant ladies doing badass things. Like, we saw, I have not watched it yet, y'all, but like I saw that trailer and I was like, oh my God. I was like, what's beautiful too, I'm talking about Everything Everywhere All at Once, we're all on the same page. I saw that trailer and I thought, oh, that one script that I've been wanting to get made, it can probably finally get made now. Because here's this incredible proof of concept of an older immigrant woman with an accent doing just badass things. I wanted to cry, because I was like, oh, the number of times that like, people are like, oh, cute. Let's see what you have over here. Like, there's just not, like, I want to see that. I want to see those stories. And maybe because I'm like a mama's girl, I like very much want to see those women be empowered and fulfilled and seen in ways that, we often don't get to see them because they sacrifice so much for us, So I would love to see that, and to see more women being badass in general, I think is a lot of what my slate is leaning towards in my world, is just wanting to see women be imperfect. I have a movie, I'm Not Your Perfect Mexican Daughter, that I wrote that America's gonna be directing. So a lot of that, a lot of like just Latinas not being perfect, and allowing us to be flawed, and immigrant families, like all of that. Like, I think I want to see more of it. And I think just genre stuff is really cool to me. And I think seeing us in those roles and having our stories woven into it in a way that's not just about that's not the center of it. It's really about the people. I think would be beautiful to see.
I love that. I think that there are a couple that I'm working on that I can't talk about. There's an animated feature that I'm really excited about, that deserves to be seen, that will be seen, that looks amazing. And yeah, can't wait to share more about that. There's this book that I would love to adapt. It's called What Storm, What Thunder. It's about different people in Haiti after the earthquake happened. It's like a 6 degrees of separation, like perspective of like 8 different people living their lives, but how their lives interweave after the earthquake, that I would love to explore. And then there's another feature about a star soccer player who discovers that he was illegal, ends up getting deported, but then smuggles himself back into the country to help his high school team win the championship game, soccer game. And of course, be with his family and his girlfriend, who's also pregnant and having their first child. I think the story that I'm most excited about, I am currently trying to make.
I guess an immigrant story is that I would love to see on screen is one where there are no borders, right? That defies all that. Borders are a man-made construction.
Down with borders. All right, I'm getting the 5-minute warning here, so I want to open it up to questions from the audience if we have any. Yes, you in the second row.
Why do you think immigrant stories that are running to opportunity are limited to white spaces only? Like, if you think about Emily in Paris, that's an immigrant story. She was in a completely different country. But my dad always said we were happy and hungry. We didn't run from being happy. We ran from being hungry. And what do you think is going to take for the media to accept happy immigrant stories where you're running to something better rather than running from something?
That's deep. I mean, gosh, I wish I had the answer to that. Like, what's it going to take to change a lot of things, I think we're all trying to do the work in some way, but I think that the fundamental thing that we're all talking about here is how many people can you get behind the camera to tell those stories? How many people can you get in front of the camera to tell those stories? Because those are the people who are going to see it the way that you're seeing it, right? Like, that are going to see it. And I have the same thing with my parents. They're like, I love Mexico. What I love, before we did season 2, I asked my parents, what do you want to see? What would you like to see for season 2? Just because I was curious. And they were like, oh, we want Pop to go back to Mexico. And I was like, hold on, what? Like, you want him to be deported? And they were like, no, they were like, we want him to go home and to show everybody how beautiful Mexico is and how we didn't want to leave, that we love where we're from and that it's a beautiful country and that it's special and it's everything that we love, and that was one of the reasons why Pop does go back to Mexico at the end and you see him visiting his father's grave, because for so many immigrants, like exactly that, they don't want to leave. They want to be in their homes with tierra, that's, my parents are constantly talking about that. And I think that's vital, but it's gonna take people like you, like me, like us up here to be able to tell those stories because we are experiencing them firsthand. So we're telling, like I said earlier, in the earlier panel, we're telling it from a place of love and we can find the nuance in that, right? We can find the nuance in what we've experienced. And then with Amelie, I don't know, like she's cute and white and documented, and people like that in this country, so I think it's a very multi-layered struggle to change that, but you got us and we hopefully more people.
I love your shirt, by the way. I'll answer it this way. I can't talk about one of them, but I hear you, and you're right. And maybe we can talk about it in a month. But, I've always thought the same thing. And on the shows that have already aired and gone, like Fresh Off the Boat, season 3, we went to Taiwan because it was important to us to talk about why family immigrated. And, it was through the guise of the children just not understanding, but they do at the end of it. And then even on Speechless, we really seized on like Minnie being English, and we went to London. So I think in all of the shows that I work on, I try to find some way that when you have an immigrant in it or somebody who is contributing to being American but isn't born here, like you have to find the nuance in it and what sort of the gratifying experience, and how it's and we try to do it. I'm proud of the 2 shows that we did do something about it. Season 3, usually when it's season 3, strategically I try to get them to spend the most money possible on that first one, and then they're in. So there's a little of just producing in it.
Awesome. Any other questions out there? Oh, we good? All right. I think we did it, y'all.
Did it.
I want to thank you all for being here again, and thank you all for your time and energy. Check out defineamerican.com if you want to learn more about how we work with Hollywood, and look out for our new research with USC this fall. We will see you around. Happy Immigrant Heritage Month!